Good morning, Grazia, India. My name is Alok, and I'm a poet and comedian on tour in India right now. I haven't been back since the pandemic, and I missed coming here so much. I feel like the audiences here have such a deep appreciation for live art. People are so attentive and curious and wonderful. So it's been such an amazing experience to be back. Yeah, so in this show in particular, I'm talking about the absurdity of gender norms. I think we're seeing a lot of conversations online and across the world about trans issues. And what so often happens is people make fun of us as trans people for what we look like. But I think what's funny is not what trans people look like and how silly it is that we continue to bully people into arbitrary gender norms that aren't actually helping anyone. So I use comedy as a way to get people to think about why we continue to do things like gendering inanimate objects like clothing, or saying that it's feminine or masculine to have a kind of emotion. And I feel like oftentimes when I speak about these things logically, people deactivate. So I'm trying to use comedy as a way to get people curious again. One of the most special parts about being an artist is that you begin to realize that you create work that genuinely connects people from completely different circumstances. That in some ways, art is a universal language that brings people together who might on the surface not seem like they have anything in common, but inside have something in common. I think we're actually unified by emotion. And one of the joys of being an internationally touring artist is that every day I get to encounter people who have such fundamentally different experiences from me that feel the same way. I think it makes me feel less lonely. I think it makes me feel more hope that it's possible to actually create meaningful connection in a world that often feels so alienating and confusing. I think I grew up in a family that told me that I should keep everything that I was feeling to myself, and if anything, only share it within my family. And it was based off of this idea that we couldn't trust anyone because intimacy meant that we could be hurt. But I believe that intimacy is worth the risk. I believe that vulnerability is a powerful way to build meaningful connection and to actually make our lives more meaningful, to make our lives more rich and abundant. And so what I found is that actually by speaking about the things that I felt most insecurities about, the most hesitations about, the most ambivalence about, those were the things that were actually pathways to durable connections with other people. So it's actually pretty amazing. I think we fear vulnerability so much, but when we live in it and when we dwell in it, it becomes like a muscle like any other, and we get so much more used to it. And I often say this idea that strangers are just potential friends. And I think that's something I've learned from being vulnerable online, that actually so many people are feeling the exact same thing as you. The thing that you think you're the strangest person in the world for feeling, there are a lot of other people who feel the same way. And so by being vulnerable, I think we can take off the mask and actually be honest with each other. And that's such a beautiful thing. I don't think that there are any rules to style. I get really sad when people think, I can't wear this color after Labor Day, or you can't pair these prints together. I'm like, all those rules are made up. And I think in poetry, it's an art form that relies on the idea that there are no rules. The only goal is to be beautiful and to feel beautiful. And that's the kind of ethos that I bring to composing an outfit. I don't think about what things look like to other people. I think about how they feel to me. I think another parallel is that fashion is one of the most accessible art forms. Not everyone goes to an art gallery, or not everyone goes to a concert, but actually people are getting dressed every day. And there's a way to communicate a story through what you're wearing. A story of where you're from, a story of what you believe in, a story of what you find curious and beautiful. And that's what a poem is too, a distillation of who you are in a small form. They're both forms of communication that I think surpass language. They're both forms of communication that are about wanting to be witnessed. And so every time I'm composing an outfit, just like I'm composing a poem, I ask myself, what am I trying to say? And I don't think oftentimes when people are thinking about fashion, they think about it like that. I think people just think of fashion as like something we do to look good. And of course we want to look good, I mean, don't get me wrong. But I think we also want to say something. And I think what I'm trying to say with both my poetry and my style is that I'm constantly becoming, that there's no one destination, it's a continual process, that every day I'm trying to be amazed and awestruck by the world, that I'm trying to cultivate within myself a quiet diligence to notice the beauty in everyone and everything, that I'm porous and that I'm open and that I'm curious, that I believe in wonder. I think another commonality is an appreciation for wonder, both in poetry and style. The sum of the parts is greater than the parts themselves. When you put certain words together, just like when you put certain colors or textiles together, on the other side, there's something greater. And I think there's a magic to both, and that's the magic of artistry. You know, I think it was really frustrating to me when I first started to really question, why do I have to look so boring? Because I often make this joke, and it's unfortunately still true, men's fashion is an oxymoron, because there's nothing really fashionable about what gets marketed as men's fashion. And so when I tried to go shopping, I'd be like, oh, this is so boring. Like, all of the cool things were in the quote women's section, and by cool I mean colorful, I mean actually interesting silhouettes. And then those clothes wouldn't fit me either because my shoulders were too broad or I was flat-chested. And so I kind of felt like I was designed out of fashion, like the people that they were imagining weren't me, and like there was a prototype in mind for what it meant to be wearing a certain kind of clothing. And then at first I saw that as a crisis. I was like, I feel erased. But then I want to reimagine that for myself and for you. Instead of seeing that as a crisis, I began to see that as an opportunity. Okay, cool. Now I get to like do a scavenger hunt every time I go to the store. I get to look across sections. I get to take things that people thought would never be fitting together and make them fit together. Maybe this t-shirt's actually a dress. Maybe this dress is actually a pair of pants. And I began to realize that actually all of these marketing plots were just suggestions. The joy about style is it's your own interpretation. I think fashion is what's being sold to you, and style is how you interpret it. And so actually, the work of degendering fashion is such a prolific and creative process. I think it gets discussed as taking away something or removing gender, but I actually want to talk about it as inviting curiosity, inviting experimentation, inviting expansion. So then it became so much fun to shop because I began to realize, oh, all of these rules, these categories, these ideas of what it means to look good, let's throw those outside. And who do I want to become? And I think that's what is so cool about being an artist, is in a world right now that fears the unknown, that says that we have to know where we're landing. It's artists who remind the world, hey, that's kind of boring. Actually, let's figure it out. Let's get curious. Let's dwell in this place where we don't know. I think that's where masterpieces happen. So, confession, I don't think I've had a low-key day in a couple of years. I've actually been on a world tour now for the past 8 months, which feels obscene to say. So it's kind of like I'm constantly catching a flight and catching feelings because I'm a water sign, so I can't not. And that means that I'm probably going through a couple of existential breakdowns, probably dealing with like waves of ennui, like the world is teetering towards collapse, what do we do? And then like peppered with extreme moments of transcendent joy, where like I see something funky or like zany and I'm like, oh my God, that's so cool and beautiful. and then back to like teetering oblivion. So it's kind of like an emotional roller coaster, but like I said, I think my primary identity in the world is my astrological sign, which is Cancer, and I just feel everything so deeply. So are there low-key days for Cancers? Because I feel like we're the ones like crying on park benches, like just looking at people and being like, I love humanity and I hate people at the same time. My go-to beauty ritual is crying, actually. I was recently learning that actually the tears that are produced when we have an allergic reaction to something fall fast, whereas the tears that produce when we're sad fall slow, because our bodies are physiologically primed towards vulnerability. A slow tear means that more people will notice and actually come to your aid. And when I learned that, that like rocked my entire world, because I actually believe that we're all meant to be connected to each other, and that things like gender actually divide us from meaningful connection with one another. And I think crying actually allows me to feel more connected to the world. I think growing up, I was told that people like me don't cry. And now I just really love it. I think it's actually a really important ritual that allows us to receive beauty in ourselves and another, that makes us understand the stakes. I worry that what's wrong in the world is that we're so dissociated from our emotion, is that The Walking Dead is not just a TV show, it's a lifestyle choice. It's that people become so desensitized to how awe-inspiring the world is. Crying is not just about sadness, it's about feeling something. Sometimes I cry at sunsets, most of the times I cry at pop music. I'm just crying all the time as a way of witnessing and encountering how awesome it is that we're alive and not merely existing. So I want to challenge the idea that we have to choose one thing, one gender or one color. So rainbow is my favorite color. I have to shout out my friend Shubika, who runs Papa Don't Preach. I love them so much. It's like my dream come true. There are so many. But I want to shout out a friend of mine named Travis Alabanza, because Travis has not been posting on Instagram so much. And so every time they do, I get so excited because I'm like, look at you, you're amazing. And then I set a lot of hearts and I text them and I'm like, post more. I think each city hits different for different reasons, but one that feels particularly meaningful to me is Kochi. My dad's from Kerala, and I just never thought in the world I'd be able to share my art in Kerala. And every time I'm back there, the Malu vibes run deep, right? I'm like drinking my coconut water, mostly crying, and I'm just so happy to be able to talk about like feminism with other Malayali people, and I feel really witnessed in it. If you haven't seen it yet, you need to watch the film Everything Everywhere All at Once. There's a lot of Oscar buzz, so don't be that person who after it wins are like, oh, I never saw that. Be ahead of the curve. I think it's one of the best movies I've ever seen in my entire life. And I think it especially resonates with Indian people because it's about intergenerational family trauma. And is that not our culture? So it's actually about how the conflict between a mother and a daughter, and especially a queer child and their parent, is so intense that it could collapse an entire universe. That's what it feels like internally, and now we can see it depicted externally.